SBA Policy Revisions?
I am. It's becoming a monthly feature of ours as we continue to update policies. So we have a few policies for you tonight. This is the first read. As we typically do, we provide an overview summary on the first page. So as you're reviewing these, I want to bring your attention to just a couple. So GBA and JFHA, it's really the same policy, but it has to sit in two places because it impacts students and impacts staff. So it's really the same policy in two spots. That is the substantial changes to Title IX, which we're all working through. Ms. Pitts was on a BSBA.
4 hours.
Yeah, Don Harding was on as well. A 4-hour BSBA webinar about the changes in Title IX and the ramifications associated with it. So it's a lot of work, levels of appeals and officers and so forth. So this is the BSBA policy reflecting that. So that's probably the most substantial.
So one of the things that, and again, I want to just remind everybody, this is a work session, so we don't have to treat it as formally as we do a board.
Absolutely.
So we can talk about it. Ms. Pitts and I touched base on it because it was overwhelming. It was an overwhelming 4 hours. So we can send you the information from that event, but I really think in a future work session, as if we don't have enough to do, it would be great if we just hit the changes, the really big pieces, because I think everybody will want to know about the changes. And granted, we do have an attorney that will answer any of our questions should we have them, but it'd be great if everybody has a basic knowledge of the changes to Title IX. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. We can do that as a presentation in an upcoming work session.
Okay, so the source of this direct language is from VSBA?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. These are the revisions that we get through VSBA. That's not to say we can't make some shifts and changes to it, but this is really our starting point for that.
So this is a first reading.
Yes.
So at the next meeting, board meeting, it'll be a second reading of the.
Yes. If you have any questions about any of these policies between now and then, please forward them to me and we'll work through those questions for you.
Okay. Our next new item is textbook transfer request.
Ma'am, Madam Chair, board members.
Hello there.
Every year I bring this request to you. I've added a little extra this year. We are asking that we do $100,000 for FY20 to the Texas Fund, which is something that we do each year for matching funds. I'm also asking that you appropriate $200,000 from the textbook fund contingency to the textbook fund in the current year, which would be FY21. Obviously, you know the situation that we're in. We're trying to do more with virtual learning. So Dr. Bishop has used a lot of funds in the textbook fund to manage through that. So I'd like to just go ahead and shift some of those funds in the current year to support those initiatives. So that's kind of two requests.
Okay. Questions, board members?
And that does come before you for action later in the work session.
So it's all within textbooks that the funds are shifting their cover.
Yes, ma'am. So we have our general operating fund that we use, for our general operating expenses, and then the textbook fund is actually a separate fund. We do get state funding for textbooks, so that goes directly into that fund, and then a portion of our general operating budget goes to match those textbook funds that we receive.
This may be a silly question, but during virtual, are there any physical textbooks that are handed out, and how are they being distributed at this point?
Yes, they were distributed from the schools.
Okay, for each level, I guess, or just as a high school, middle school, and elementary school? Oh, okay.
It's dependent on the class, the specific class, and whether there's a textbook associated with it. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. That'll take us into old business and something we've come to know a lot about, return to learn.
Yes, as promised, we said we would, each work session, we would talk about return to learn, talk about our next steps in the process, and kind of work through some of those details. I do have a presentation for you.
Is that presentation on the website here?
I'm going to share my screen. So
You can share it on the Zoom.
Yeah, I'm just not gonna be able to read it.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, great.
All right. So good evening again. Want to bring you up to date on our return to learn work. I'll go next slide for me. Want to talk a little bit about the first 2 weeks back, that we did have a virtual start. The virtual start had some bumps in the road, but overall, a pretty smooth start. We've learned a lot of lessons in the process, and are getting better each week with our professional development, with the work we're doing with kids and families, still working towards bringing kids back in session. So week 1, we opened up with online access centers. So if you needed internet access, we had it available at each of our schools. I will tell you, with the exception of one elementary school, George Watkins, it's pretty underutilized from the space that we have. So we'll continue to publish that and continue to reach out to families that if you do have that need, that we do have that available for you. I actually talked to a parent just today and said, well, she relies on somebody else to bring her. We run transportation as well. So if you do need online access, if you contact the school, we'll arrange transportation fees for you as well. So transportation started week 2 and off and running with those pieces. We've had some interesting stories from the first 2 weeks. I believe we had a pet pig show up on screen. We've had a student upside down. We've had all kinds of interesting things occur during the first 2 weeks. But all in all, I couldn't be prouder of our families, our students, and our teachers for really adjusting to something we've never done before. Our support staff, we had to work with our support staff because in a virtual environment, we do not have the same role necessarily. So our bus drivers, some of our paraprofessionals and so forth have been in different roles and have really overall done a nice job of stepping up and taking on that role. So in our online access centers, we have bus drivers and paraprofessionals that are doing the supervision there. We have actually some of our bus drivers and paraprofessionals doing a wide variety of jobs around the school division, but just working with each person. Our call center, which we talked about quite a bit at the last meeting, is operated by paraprofessionals and bus drivers. And we have a leader emerge from that group, and she's done a fantastic job of kind of facilitating those pieces. Not able to answer every question right away, but we're getting better at that as well, and the call volume has gone down dramatically from the first day. So professional development is still about teaching in the virtual world. How do you engage with students? How do you plan for that? And how to work through any technology challenges that you may have along the way. So on the first day of school at 8:59, when we all went live, I think I held my breath all the way till 9:45. And knowing that a couple school visits were a little ahead of us as far as the start time, some of the difficulties had us really impressed. And then day 2, when I woke up to rain, and I know how that impacts satellite and different things like that. We're navigating those challenges and continue to get better with that, all with an eye on being able to return. One of the things that I'm probably most pleasantly surprised is our average daily attendance rate. So the percent of kids that are engaging with us daily. What you can see by school is the minimum percentage. And really that was by and large on the first day of school. 96 to 94% of kids engaged or attending virtually. And now you can see the maximum too in the first 2 weeks. So the engagement rate, kids attending courses, has been quite high. And that has been really a beautiful surprise as far as kids and families and teachers and so forth. We worried a lot about this engagement rate and this attendance piece. Now we're getting to the point, now that we're in week 3, we're looking at assignments, missed assignments, and all of those components too. So we'll be able to continue to report on those things for you.
How are you gathering the attendance data? Is it per class that the attendance is coming from?
We are gathering per class, and it is for the it's for the entire day. So if there's a meaningful interaction, remember we were talking about how we're adjusting the regulation for the attendance policy. And so if there's a meaningful interaction with the student and the teacher, then that is an attending of that class. But this is, so just like in a normal school day, if you're there for 5 minutes, you're attending school. I find when I'm looking at the data that the students most of them are consistently attending for all their classes, but they're not, we're falling up behind with those students as well. Friday is a good part of that, because that's basically that Friday day. That first morning is really just teachers capturing those students who are not attending their particular class or missing 2 or 3 classes in a row or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Wanted to bring you some pictures from inside the first 2 weeks and by level. So you see New Kent High School and some of the setups that we've had. Probably the biggest part of the back to school week was rearranging your setup so that you teach in a virtual form. One of the conversations that I had, one of the conversations I had with some area superintendents, they have some of their teachers that are doing both the face-to-face and the virtual piece. And it's tough because it's 2 really different classroom configurations to be able to teach virtually and so forth. So they're very creative and inventive, have multiple screens, and are doing a great job of connecting, engaging. I do happen to have a junior who's actually told me he actually loves this experience. But it works for him. I know it doesn't work for every kid, but he's really kind of found his niche in the assignments and working independently and so forth. So that's some of our New Kent High School folks in action. Just a reminder that our teachers and our staff do report every day, and they work from their classrooms. We do have our administrators here. So I don't know if we're on the high schools. And Ms. Strickland, I know you're walking in. Do you want to add on to how the high school has started?
Sure. I do believe that Mr. Valtteri is with us virtually. He just say was checking in. So some data points that we just had here at the high school from an administrative meeting earlier or last week. We do have active participation in the online access center. We had 47 students sign up, and 32 of them are attending regularly Monday through Friday, as well as some increased participation in the AM and PM office hours that are provided in our instructional schedule. We did have many days of some successful material and supply pickup here at the high school, and based on our rosters of textbooks and things coming in, it does look like a ton of students and families were able to utilize that service. Of course, we did have some tech hurdles, but the tech help desk has been an amazing resource that is housed here at the high school for teachers, students, and families. Lastly, I would just say that we're very optimistic with how things are going, and we're expecting, feedback from teachers, students, the community, as well as members of the school board. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you, Al. So each week we've been adding an additional layer. One of the layers that I neglected to mention in the beginning is we're still doing our grab and go meal service, which really picked up this past week. We do it at both George Watkins and New Kent Middle School. It is for all families, kids 0 to 18. You just drive through, give us the last name, how many meals you need, and you have meals for a week. I think last week was our biggest week so far, and on par with our summer feeding that we've been doing. So we do it on Tuesday afternoons, and we do it on Wednesday mornings, so families have that flexibility. And if you can't get there during those times, you can contact Leslie Smith either via email or phone, and we'll make sure we deliver. That's another thing that some of our support staff are doing. We're delivering Chromebooks, we're delivering meals, and doing all those components. So where there's a gap, we're filling. So you have New Kent Middle School. You can see our child nutrition workers there on your left, and a couple of other setups. On the top right, you can see their online access center. So you can kind of get an eye of what it looks like. I've made a few fast friends at the middle school because we are seeing the same kids every day. And they really do. Dr. Harding and I walked the middle school, I think the first week of school. And I guess it sounds bad to say how surprised I am at how engaged they are, but they really do a fantastic job in those online access sites. Ms. Gray, you want to add anything to the middle school story?
Yes, and I am just so proud of my teachers and staff members. It is a really hard shift to go from face-to-face direct instruction to virtual instruction. And I really feel that they have done a wonderful job with that. They have worked collaboratively together. Their pacing's on point because it could be, you have teachers talking for a long period of time, but they really tried to make all these lessons and activities engaging and not too stressful for parents. I've had an opportunity to actually do some virtual observations, and that's been quite fun for me because, I get to see it from the lens of a student. And, our students have really stepped up to the plate as well. I know that there's going to be some hurdles because, at middle school adolescents, we have to be really accountable for our learning much more than we do at elementary school. So we realize there's going to be some times when they're going to need a little extra push and a little extra support to get them where they need to be. But for the most part, I've seen students engaged in learning. I've seen students actively discussing and talking about their learning. And if they have a problem or an issue, they've been willing to go into the chat or to actually talk to the teachers depending on what their connectivity is. And they've been excited about this opportunity at least to be able to interact with their peers. So that's what's near and dear to my heart. And also all of the wonderful support of our parents and community has really been amazing. This is a very difficult time, I'm sure, for parents. And they really stepped up too as far as making sure their students are ready and prepared to have all the resources that they need. We're very appreciative of that as well.
We have some of our pictures from Watkins, so you can start to see some similar setups. Whiteboards in the back, camera angles have been a learning opportunity for staff at all levels. But even our youngest learners and our teachers have done a great job of adjusting. I don't know if Mr. Mack wants to jump in on George Watkins a little bit.
Yeah, I would just say teachers have done an incredible job. Even though the day ends at 1:30, those folks, 15 minutes after 1:30, they are all meeting as teams, and they're in there. A lot of times, it's just trying to regroup what worked well today, what didn't, what do we need to do differently. I kind of repeat back on what Kelly said. I'm really amazed at the engagement, the student engagement that we've had, not just in the online access areas, but the student engagement that's going on in homes. And really, that's a tribute to the parents and the community and the kids. And I think the kids just want that socialization so badly, to be able to see other kids and to be able to network, that they really are paying attention and they really are willing to work with their teachers. Unfortunately, some days it's a day-to-day operation of connectivity. Some days are better than others. Some days we struggle with some of the internet connectivity, some of the Chromebook music. It's really difficult for a kindergartner or a first grader to be able to manipulate between Seesaw and Schoology, and those things are difficult. But they're getting there, and the teachers are working incredibly hard to do that and to make sure that they're giving them every opportunity to be successful. And I've really been pleasantly surprised there. I really have, from as far as we've gotten so far. And I think what this has really done is it's brought our staff incredibly close together, because they really are working and piggybacking off of each other and giving each other support. These kind of setups, we see in every classroom. A lot of them spent their own money on their special lighting, to make themselves look so much more engaging, not younger, just engaging. That's been impressive. So they're absolutely making the best of it. I give them all the credit in the world. And like I said, it's kind of remarkable how things have actually gone so far. So I've been impressed, and I give all the credit to the teachers because it's constant. Their work together is constant. And, they know they've been handed something that's difficult to do, and they're really taking advantage of it.
Thank you. Not to leave out New Kent Elementary, but we have some pictures from New Kent Elementary too, including one of our students, and also the Sunshine Committee, who's ever present at New Kent Elementary with some stress relief. So, Ms. Mumford, you want to?
Yeah, I would, again, going last, I seem to always reiterate what Russ is saying, but our teachers have really done a nice job, a great job. They've been really pleased with the way the afternoon team planning has gone, especially the Fridays, and the coordination with Watkins that they've done. They do say school is getting easier to navigate, and they appreciate that. And the parents have been extremely supportive. I was, due to a shortage in the office, I've been answering the phone a lot more than I ever wanted to. And all the parents I get a call, they're saying, you know, I appreciate what you do, but could I get another Chromebook? But it's that sort of working together kind of attitude. It's been very impressive. Overall, the students are engaged, and one of the teachers commented they seem glad to be here. And I will give you exact quote from our kindergarten head teacher, Emily Sherman, that the virtual has gone far better than she imagined. And Rinley is, if you don't know her, she's nothing but candid. And so I think overall it is going well. And again, like Russ said, there are some issues with connectivity. You know, one poor lady called and said, my Google thing just keeps spinning, and all I could suggest was reboot. She said, I did that. I said, try again. But it's gone well. We did have our adaptive kids in our pre-K come back, and that has gone well also. The teachers, I talked to both Lauren and the adaptive teachers, and they've been pleased with it, and they felt it was necessary to come back. And so that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So if you have any questions for them while you have them, they're not going anywhere, at least I don't think.
Well, the only question I had is that I know we discussed this in earlier, but are we at the point yet to find out from the evaluation standpoint of view where they are based on missing or March through the end of the year, and now we're starting a new year? Have we started any evaluation tools to figure out where are they? Is everybody, are the teachers comfortable with that? Are they on grade level, or what are the gaps that we're finding so far, or are we not that far down the road?
I think we're in the process of the elementary, specifically the PALS assessment.
We're doing the PALS right now. I think to answer your question as candidly as I can, the teachers are working their way through. We've got midterms in 2 weeks. And at the upper grade levels, they're feeling pretty confident. But at the lower grade levels, where you have a rubric, it's an observation sheet, and you've got to get a kindergartner, and you've got 20 of them on your screen, and you want to get Johnny to go, hey, apple, it's a little more difficult. The teachers are having some frustration there. They feel they can work through it, break them out in small groups, but they're not with it. They're, at least in my building, with the technology yet to try and manage that point. So.
Well, and I think one of the things we talked about early on, in addition to the fact that, technology's gone better than we thought it was going to go, but it still takes time. And then on top of that, we've got the social emotional piece, the fact that teachers want to get to know their students. And I think one of the things we all talked about was relax, get to know your students, get used to the format, and then the academics will follow. So, time will tell what kind of gaps we have, but we'll fill them up.
We will. Who knows where they were when they came back, but we're going to figure that out. And good instruction is always, the kids here, that's where you start. That's what you have to do.
So you can see on our screen, this is Ms. Holloway's class, and you don't put kids' pictures up, but you can do this when they put their picture in front of their own face. So you kind of see, how they're demonstrating, what they learned and what the work was, and kind of a quick assessment there. So our teachers are incredible. Our administrators are incredible. They've really done. I hate to keep using the word surprise, because when you have a team like this, you should be surprised that they rise to it, but they really have done a phenomenal job with this pivot.
Do the teachers like it? I mean, are there pieces that you think will stick after we leave this virtual world?
I think for the secondary particularly, we use the Chromebooks to help, we use the Chromebooks effectively, but now we can see their true potential, that maybe we didn't quite see, when we were doing them with the face-to-face and, technology usage.
So as a parent, I've noticed more engagement, and maybe it's just because there's no other choice, but just I have noticed that the use of Schoology and the use of Power School has increased by the teachers too, because sometimes they wouldn't input things until later. So I think that some of that has been nice. So,
Well, I mean, I think our kindergarten and first grade teachers have always done an incredible job, especially for evaluating student performance. With the use of Seesaw and some other platforms that they use regularly, that they have an amazing knack to get the kids to be able to do those things through technology. How much the teachers would actually want to keep kids? Teachers want to see kids.
Right.
We want to see kids, and that's the most difficult part, because we all know that's the best instruction. And I guess to go back to Mr. Deed's question, we are doing the PALs now, and of course, it's also very difficult to do PALs virtually. Because sometimes they might be getting a little extra guidance. They're like, that word, no, stop. Just yourself. So those are things that you have to get used to. I mean, I think there'll definitely be some things that will carry over, but there's nothing like having a kid in front. And I think that's what our folks know. And but we know we're in an unfortunate path that hopefully we'll get through. And we're getting better at technology. Don't have a choice.
I was just gonna add, my teachers, they all want to have somebody in person in front of them, I think across the grade levels. But a lot of them are coming up and saying, even when we do come back, I really am much better at technology. I know how to apply it. This has been, a great experience, even though it was a little stressful to start. They're saying how much it's expanded their skills.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That was kind of my gut feeling about that as well.
At the high school specifically, one thing that I know the team we hear repetitively is the amount of collaboration that's taking place between educators. Whereas, with different planning on our instructional schedule, it's been really nice to see teachers coming together even cross-curricularly for assignments and just feedback. Definitely something that we haven't had that in the past.
That's cool. So maybe in the future, if you have a science class that's working with an English class, even if they're in person, they can do the virtual through them.
I think we're all in our first year this year, no matter how many years we've done this before. So it's really brought this collaboration by level, by content, by school, because we're all working through this together. So no better way to form a team than through a tough situation. So that's been, we're all learning.
It's good. I will tell you a funny story that I just heard this week. To a high school level of Strickland, that there's a student at Prince George. Prince George is doing some face-to-face. And so they basically said this one student, they had an option of going virtual face-to-face. This one high school student's going face-to-face. When he started talking to his friends who were doing virtual, and he found out that, you mean all I have to do is get up 10 minutes before my class starts? Why would I want to go face-to-face? I got to wake up an hour and a half early, get ready, get dressed, drive to school, walk around school all day, and all I had to do was roll out of bed 10 minutes, and I was ready to fly. So That's an interesting observation. So when you go back to this, don't think that high school students especially, that will not be in the back of their mind.
Well, and I think that's that sounds like a typical teenager.
I mean, but that's what they're thinking.
But I do think, and we're not that far down this road, but we do have an eye on it. I think we will be running a virtual school in Newcastle moving forward, because I think while it does not meet everyone's need, it is meeting a need for a subset. How big that is, we don't know. But we have teachers that'll be able to do it, and we have kids that it works for. Hopefully for more than just, I gotta get out.
The convenience, but I just thought that that's the way the teenagers think, but, it's like, if I have the option and I get the same education, why do I want to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning versus getting up at 10 minutes to 8 before our first classes to be available? But those are things as we move forward, we understand as part of the process of what virtual is.
I think all the teachers have done a great job, so I want to thank all of the administrators here. I do wonder, I question at the elementary level and then even at the middle and high school level, with resource teachers that are teaching physical education and art, the larger classes. Has that been more challenging as well, managing the size of some of those classes that the children are attending?
Our class is the same size, so I don't.
Okay, then at the middle school level,
it's always challenging managing classes, and I think when we first started, there were some hiccups because people kind of learned how they wanted to, if they wanted to team teach, if they wanted to work with their colleagues, how they were going to manage all that piece. But I feel like now at this point, it's pretty smoothed out. I think it's the fear of the unknown sometimes that makes it more difficult for people. And once they get into it and they realize how it works and how that's worked for them and the students, then I think those kinds of things move themselves out naturally. But I think, as far as the dedication and the commitment and the excitement of having to get to the class, I think all of our teachers felt that way.
I have to say, from walking around, I haven't made it to 2 schools, and it's been, I've been speechless at how well the teachers have been doing, and I don't mean that in that I didn't expect that they would do well, but when you walk around and you walk down the halls and you see all the level of commitment that's going on, it's just incredible and it's overwhelming. So we are so grateful to the teachers and the parents and the kids who have learned things about themselves that they wouldn't have otherwise learned. So sometimes stress puts us in a situation where we get pushed and we learn so much, but I just wanted you to know, I'll make it to the other schools eventually, elementary and middle.
And Dr. Harding and I walked a couple times. One was on one of the very first days, and we were at the elementary school, and you just, there was a lot there, and they were processing a lot, having to work through a lot, but each day you came back, they just really wrestled with that. So I just really appreciate the administrators giving them an environment where they could wrestle with it. Teachers say, only cry this many times a day. It's going to be really just kind of working through those pieces, just to see the transformation of our staff has been incredible. Now, when the board met and voted, the most recent vote, it was for virtual for the semester. But one of the things that I appreciate the most is that you gave us the flexibility to have opportunities within that semester. So that if we saw an area that we could go sooner safely, that we would do that. And we have done that. So we really have a phased approach, really looking at regional and county health metrics. Staffing, is a big part of our story and why we went virtual. So working with human resources on the staffing piece of it. We're going to talk in a minute about another survey now that families have been in virtual learning for 3 weeks, especially at the elementary level. Would students choose in-person learning in the hybrid model? Would they choose virtual? That number is going to change again. So when we did the initial survey, we were at 13% of families choosing virtual. When it came time to really decide, it was 35%. I think when we go out again and say, what would you choose now that you've been in it? We're going to get a different number. I would guess it's going to be somewhere between 13 and 35, but I've been wrong several times on this. It could be higher than 35. And then Another criteria we're looking at, and that's why we want to do these phases coming in, is the health of students and staff in our schools. Making sure that we're not having any COVID-related sicknesses or quarantines and those pieces will weigh into what do we do next and how do we phase it in. So then you can see the metrics again on the left side. Those are things that I just went through. With those metrics, we look at our plan for return. So making sure, one of the things that I thought was very smart that the team was working through is, even though we started virtual, we continued all preparations for hybrid. So you see the signs when you walk through, you see the hand sanitizing stations, you see all of those components, just as if we're going to hybrid. Because when we move to hybrid, we don't need to be doing those pieces, the plexiglass pieces and those pieces. All of that is moving forward as if we are hybrid or will be hybrid. So looking at scheduling, so when we do return in person for a cohort, we do have to do some schedule tweaks and some schedule shifts and some schedule changes because it all depends on who chooses hybrid and who chooses virtual and what does that instructional plan look like. Right now, kids are in session 4 days a week with a check-in on Friday. When we phase to in-person learning, it will likely be under the hybrid model. So now you're going to every other day. So the instructional plan has to change. What are you going to do when you're in school? What are you going to do when you're out of school? Because you won't have that direct contact with the teacher on the day that you're not in school. So those are all considerations in our plan for return. And then the third component of it is that cohort returns. So we work through that process each time. What do the metrics tell us? Are we ready on the plan for return? And then the cohort returns. We look at the metrics, which include how that cohort's doing, make sure we're ready. Another piece that's not on there, it would go under master schedule, is really the transportation of the things. Make sure we have our routes done as we actually access. So that's the process and what we work through when looking at a group of students to return.
Go back to the previous slide for just
Sure.
a second. So you're going to survey, you're going to need information from parents.
Yes.
We're going to need information from staff too, from teachers, right? I mean, okay, I think about the hybrid, and I know we've talked about this before. When you've got virtual most of the week, and then you've got hybrid, and it's 2 days a week, it just seems like less than.
I've talked to a number, I said, under 10 parents over the past 2 weeks about wanting to return in person. And I asked that very question. I said, does it feel like a step backwards for you as a parent? You're going from 4 days a week to in person 2 days a week. And to a person, they said, if it has been in person in school, then that feels like a step forward for us. We've had that same conversation internally. Now, we'll say, depending on the numbers, we're looking at capacity and those pieces. If the numbers yielded something that allowed us to do more, we could certainly look at that piece.
But would it be something like that where they have half of the students on one day, but they're still running virtual on all at the same time that they're in the classroom when you're doing both?
That would be very difficult to do at the elementary level.
Right.
At the secondary level, it would not be easy, but I can see it being, there's a possibility you could do both. But to have 12.
That is the question, I think, is if you have to choose between your child being in school 2 days and there's nothing on these other 2 days.
There would be independent learning
Well,
activities.
independent learning,
But
but
direct teacher interaction. Teachers would still have the office hours that they have currently, so 8 to 9 and 2 to 3. So there would be opportunities to engage during those office hours. But that would be the slide moving forward.
So is the same teacher delivering virtual education and in person at the same time?
At the elementary, ideally not. You would have a virtual kindergarten teacher, you would have an in-person kindergarten teacher.
But at the middle and high school?
That,
It would depend on how many students decide to go virtual and how many students decide to go hybrid. Because again, it's gonna be a challenge with scheduling these. But it could be that we have enough, that we have a cohort of teachers that are dedicated to virtual learning and the rest are doing hybrid, or it could be that we have teachers that have that their part of that their schedule that makes them be able to be virtual. It can also be staffed by teachers that need to help.
So there might be some shifting, and so once you shift to the other method, you might shift teachers too, in order for all the pieces to work together.
The logistics and the scheduling behind it is intense.
And maybe it's just the way it seems, but it seems like that's going to have a lot of different gaps in learning. Like I think you might see students all over the place. I mean, it's just something to consider. Not that, I mean, if people want hybrid and we can move towards hybrid, that's great. But I think your test scores eventually are going to show kids all over the place. Because working from home is not the same as being in class. I mean, we know
Right.
that. I don't know. I mean,
But I think the concern is, maybe I'm wrong, I'm sure the administrators probably, whatever we do, I think there has to be a great deal of consistency at it. And I think that's going to be a real challenge. And I think the hybrid thing, the hard part is the consistency. So if, I guess in my mind, if I'm thinking of hearing what everybody said right now with virtual, if you went that, it really is not a 2-day. It would be, I think in the ideal world, it would be like on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And that's what you have to do versus the every other. And I think the facility issue is probably going to roll into that. But I think that for things to work the way that you would like them to get the consistency would have to be concurrent versus here today, off tomorrow, here today, off tomorrow, to that. Because I think, like you said, I think it's going to be hard for logistically to make all that happen once you start breaking up all these gaps. Whereas most parents and students would say, if I'm going to go to school, I want to go to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I just don't want to go to school Monday or Tuesday and Thursday. They want consistency, especially at the elementary school level. I think that's going to be maybe not. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. If I was a student, I would want to be consistent.
Well, the virtual option will remain 4 days a week regardless.
Correct.
Correct?
Right.
That's what, when you signed up for virtual in the beginning, I said it was for.
Yeah, and that's what I guess that's my point. If we're doing 4 days a week in one, I think it's going to be hard to jump.
Right.
We were doing that, I mean, the initial proposal was to have the hybrid or virtual from the beginning, but now that families have gone 4 days virtual and we've shifted to hybrid, it feels different, and we've had that conversation.
Well, that was the concern with a hybrid approach, is that it's part-time school, because you're with a teacher half the time that a virtual student is. And that's going to be a huge concern. A lot of parents may rethink that. They may think about it differently now that they've gone through the virtual experience.
Yeah, just like I said, the high school teacher that I talked to basically said, at this point, they would either prefer to do all virtual or do all in-person. The hybrid for them would be very, very challenging to flip-flop back and forth just because of the inconsistency of it. Because now they're in a routine of, they know how their week is programmed out. And their challenge is, how do I flip that whole mindset now that I've trained myself to do this?
How soon were you thinking of putting out a survey of families again to ask for input?
In the next week, an initial survey, because that is what would determine the next step, when the next step would occur. But we can, well, going back to a previous meeting, when we have the survey developed, we'll share it with the board before we push it out and make sure we have those. I'll send it to Dr. Harding and make sure we have it where we need it.
So the other thing is that it's beyond the scope of our work session tonight. And I know we all really appreciate getting questions from teachers. So teachers put together a lot of questions and we all had a chance to glance at them, but we haven't had a chance to dig into them. I think it's really important for us to do that, and whether that means we, maybe we do what we did when we first started. A lot of times people don't realize that we had all of these shared Google documents and we were asking a lot of questions. Could we take the questions from the teachers and put them on a shared Google document? And then the answers to those questions could be there on the right. And I mean, and then we could talk, we can talk about it
Absolutely.
at the next board meeting, or we can make comments in the Google document. I feel like that's a lot. I mean, when I first saw it, I was like, that's a lot of questions. And I think they took the time to do it. We should take the time to answer it. Right?
Yeah.
Well, and probably a lot of it is, somebody already knows operationally.
You might already have the answers, right?
Right. You may already have the answers to a lot of these questions, but.
Questions from teachers?
Mm.
I'm a little,
So,
on this stuff.
Okay. Oh,
that was just friends, that was just.
oh, it was just to us. Okay. So we received a long list. Teachers got together and put together a list of questions if we were to go hybrid, right? Was it
These were just kindergarten teachers.
kindergarten teachers?
Correct.
I don't know, at least elementary school.
She said kindergarten.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so very, like, at least it was like an hour before this meeting, I saw it. So there was a list of questions from teachers. Some of them are probably already answered. Some of them will be easy to answer. But we just want to make sure that they're the ones, they're the boots on the ground right now. They're the ones that are actually delivering the service. And we talked about how difficult it is at the lower levels to teach. So we should hear what their questions and concerns are.
Absolutely.
So I apologize. I thought it went to everybody. I didn't realize that. So if we could just, what we'll do is, put the questions on a Google document and everybody can see it and we can answer the questions.
Absolutely.
That way everybody gets to see it.
Yep.
Okay. I just love it that they care enough that they want to make it right and get that information to us.
You've heard in the presentation so far, every single person has talked about how amazing our teachers are. So yeah, we definitely want to make sure we answer those questions because they are the ones that will execute.
Okay. Awesome.
I also think that switching gears is hard on teachers, so we just need to keep that. I mean, it's hard on families, but it's also hard on teachers because we can say, okay, this is the direction we're going. Now we're going to go in this other direction. Not that I don't think we should. I mean, we should be considering all of our options and moving forward and doing what's best for kids. But it's hard.
Well, and I think you'll see that's part of the thinking beside. I'm not sure if it's next slide or the one after that. We don't have dates necessarily associated with these bases. It's just in conversations what makes sense about bringing students back and knowing that the current pandemic is flexible, fluid, and spikes and drops and so forth. That we really want to navigate this and make each step successful. Online access centers have been incredibly successful. Mr. Moncrief talked about pre-K special ed and students on adaptive curriculum has been successful. But we want that next step to be successful. And we want to make sure we answer all those questions ahead of time. One of the things that we're talking about, those students that came back last week, it is an everyday situation. It's not a hybrid because of capacity. So absolutely. So this is where we are with draft cohort. It does say draft because it's still conversation that we're working through. I just wanted you to know, and I wanted our community to know and families to know that when we took the approach of the first semester that we would look for opportunities. And these are the cohorts that we have in place right now. But we have several meetings this week to continue talking about them. And just like we've been working through the other components as far as schedule, we can navigate these cohorts as well. So cohort 1, those are kids that are already here. So that's already started. That started on the 14th. K-12 students with IEPs with an adaptive curriculum. That's the subset. And pre-K students with IEPs. The natural progression as we see it right now is to start with their youngest learners. I think you heard with both principals that the younger grades are the most difficult to navigate in a virtual world. I think we talked about that quite a bit before we decided to go virtual. That would be the biggest piece. So we would take the approach of starting with their youngest learners and then moving forward. But we would be looking at the health metrics. We'd be looking at our staffing conditions. We do have our staffing data, but that staffing data also changes on a daily basis too. So this would be, if those components are in place, it would allow us to take that next step. So K1, right now we do have the possibility, but we need to talk about it more, about bringing 2-5 students who have an IEP in for some in-person learning, English language learners. Cohort 3 would be grades 2 and 3, 4 and 5, and we'll see what those next cohorts look like. Do we do 6 and 9 as a starter because they're new to that school and get them in first? Or do we continue the pattern of going 6, 8, and then 9, 12? So that's the current look and the current thinking. Thoughts on the cohorts and the overall approach that we're taking to phase back in person learning.
So I just wanted to understand the cohort. In cohort 2 says grade 2 through 5 students with IEPs, English language learners, are they not included? So in the K through 12 students with IEPs, but those are only the ones that are with an adaptive curriculum.
Right. These would be
right?
the remaining students who have an IEP but are not adaptive curriculum. So if they're in a collaborative setting or a number of different categories.
Okay. So any children with an IEP would not be excluded. So every child that has an IEP in grades 2 through 5 would be able to come back.
That's what we have on the draft piece
Okay.
right now.
I'm
But
just making sure.
that
I
would be
understand.
that would have to be conversations with IEP teams and the families and talk about what that looks like. Because a piece of that would still need to be virtual with the classroom teacher, because the classroom teacher would be teaching virtual, and then you'd have the special ed services that would be provided in person too. It's an innovative way to bring that forward and to be able to do more sooner in a small controlled setting. But there are logistics that go with that too. Once again, if say third grade student more choosing virtual and fewer choosing in person, then we have to shift the staffing with that as well. So all of this is dependent on some of those data points. I just wanted you to see kind of our approach to phasing students back in.
Do we have the facilities with the current numbers that we have to accommodate all of that for cohort 2?
In the hybrid model, we know we do, because we
Okay.
did all that legwork before, and that's why we started with that hybrid approach. Now, once we get the data back from families and see what the numbers are, then we can look at the schedule piece.
Would it kind of mirror what cohort 1 is doing, because aren't they 4 days a week?
Cohort 1 is 4 days a week, but they're in such small numbers we can accommodate it. So when we did the
So
work,
we don't know what the numbers are too, whether or not it would be 4 days a week.
we know we can do the hybrid piece, and then looking at the numbers, looking at capacity, looking at staffing, we'd be able to determine that. But hybrid is kind of our starting point, but you guys have made a number of good points this evening to look at that plan.
But the cohort 2 doesn't include 6th to 12th graders with IEPs?
Correct, that is not.
Would that be because more of a staffing issue or just a logistical issue?
A little of both. Logistics being one of the drivers.
And, sorry, cohort 5 would be grades 6 through 9.
Yes. On this initial piece was looking at the kids who are new to the school, so 6 and 9.
Just 6th graders and 9.
But that's a conversation that we need to have more with our secondary administrators and figure out what the right approach would be, whether it's 6, 8, and then we go 9, 12. That's just where we're at right now. Like our kindergartners, our 6th graders and 9th graders have never walked through that building before, because they started on a virtual start, so we could give them a head start with some transition. Typically, like we do in the summer, we do a little transition work with our 6th graders and 9th graders. But
So based on the current, maybe that's the next slide, based on the current metrics that you have, in an ideal world, how quickly could that happen?
it's a great question. I think that is the next slide. No, it's not. What was the slide that was? Is it the next one?
Well, it's really this slide. I mean, we're looking at the 1 is like 2 weeks, we're thinking, and then
So really, and I thought we had a slide dedicated to it, so I guess I'm not that good. But that really is the next piece. So the review of metrics. So right now we're looking at how our current programs are doing. that we would make sure that it's running well for 2 weeks. So let's say when we start the K1 piece, we would look at that for 2 weeks. How are the kids doing? How's the staffing going? How are the health pieces? Have we had any? I think it's important to make this point here. We will not be able to provide a COVID-free environment. We don't control all of the variables. Kids leave us, kids come, staff leave us, staff come. We can do a lot to mitigate the risk. But if you've been reading what's happening across the Commonwealth, across the nation, there are staff, there are students, there are shutdowns and starts and those kind of pieces. That's why we want to watch it for 2 weeks, see how we're doing with those pieces, and then look at the next group to bring in and work the transportation on that.
So as long as the newspaper doesn't run out of the room and post this before we get to post it. Sorry.
This is for being minutes.
Okay, gotcha. No, you beat us to it last time, and there was a lot of people that were confused.
So one of the other thoughts with the hybrid and virtual, having both of those, when we ask parents to commit to one or the other. I mean, you're gonna ask the survey, but that's not really the same as a commitment.
And this would be a commitment.
So when they do the survey, that would be a commitment.
Correct.
And once they commit to hybrid, we're not able to force them to stay hybrid if for some reason they start to go hybrid and they feel uncomfortable and want to go back to virtual.
We'd have to work that out with the family.
No, you could, once they stay virtual, you could hold
Yes.
that.
It works a lot better the other way.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, well, you're saying is that it works a lot harder going from hybrid back to virtual.
It's
So you've got people that commit and you've got, let's say you've got 50% of people that are like, I want to go hybrid, but then they get to school and they say, you know what, this isn't working for me. I want to go back to virtual. We have to make sure we can still accommodate back to virtual.
That's a
easy.
lot easier for us to accommodate. Not that it's easy, but a lot than the reverse.
Right.
Virtual coming in person, and we have to redo. Because in those situations, we would have, now it could change your schedule, it could change your teacher, it could change some of those components, but we should be offering a virtual variety of whatever that is. So we'd have to work that through with families. First step would be to get at the root of what's uncomfortable or what they're having difficulty with and try to solve it in the current piece versus a kid starting virtual, then going hybrid and then have to go back virtual. But if it's beyond the scope of what we can solve, then we would make every effort to work with the family.
And that would be per semester.
Yes.
The one that-
So the next semester would be a clean slate for everybody to start from, making decisions.
Right.
And currently the next semester is in January, all right? Let's see. I can't remember exactly what at the top of my head.
It's
January 30th, yeah, grade adjourned January. Yeah.
January is like the end of it.
So you're saying the middle of October would basically be the soonest you could do this?
Well, it would probably be a little bit later than that.
Okay.
By the time we get the survey out, have the survey come back. I think somebody on the board made the point about teachers and teachers shifting, to be able to make this shift with our teachers, make sure our staffing is in place. And to be able to articulate the schedule that we would like to run.
Will there be an effort, and I know this is one more variable, but I could just go back to the social emotional piece. Will there be an effort to try to not change teachers unless you absolutely have to?
Absolutely. Minimum number of teachers change. Not saying that nobody will have to shift a teacher.
Right.
There will be some teacher shifting, but I know everybody will make an effort to make least disruption possible.
I mean, I just want to clarify too, like when we look at the metrics, that's like 2 weeks, to really understand the metrics and making sure that we're doing something that's safe for all of our students. And then we need another, for that planning for return, it's another 2 weeks that we have to plan for that return. So it takes some time.
Communicate with families, get to go, run routes and
Transportation.
and get people in.
I got you.
Physical spacing. What kind of is the metric that we're tracking to when, we talk about returning when it's safe? What are we looking at? We're looking at all the data. I mean, as far as.
we're looking at multiple data sources. So we're looking at the region, state, region, local, more on the local side and paying attention to some of the big areas where our staff comes from. Really, the biggest thing we're looking at is how our current staff and students are doing. How successful have we been? I think every successful step forward gives us the confidence that we can take the next step. So, have we had students or staff quarantine? Have we had these pieces? How many times have we had to move back in person to virtual? All of those metrics in between, probably the most critical ones for us.
I'm assuming when our internet access centers are open, those children, those students are very isolated. They probably stay. I mean, there's no teacher interaction. Teachers are not seeing them. They're with staff, and that's quite well orchestrated.
Yes. Yeah. So I've had a couple questions on how come you can do internet access, but you can't do it in person. If you come see internet access, kids are in a cohort. Kids go to the same exact seat every day. They don't walk the halls. They don't really do a lot of moving around and minimal, if any, interaction. And they're in one contained space that is cleaned at the end of every day.
That brings up another good question though, is we end up morphing into this hybrid system, then what does that do? Because we'll have students here on a regular basis. Does that do away with the internet access areas that we currently have? Because they're taking up the cafeteria areas, and do those areas go away now? Because now we'll be using the cafeteria like it's an everyday occurrence. So how do we?
And those are some of the logistics we have to work through. I strongly think that even once we're K-5, say the elementary school, we're going to have kids that want to utilize internet access. They don't want to have the interactions of moving around the school.
Where do we put them?
Their stuff. But I also think we'll need viewer, so we'll be able to look at classroom space or technical spaces. Each school has multiple spaces that they utilize, so I think we would be able to collapse some of that. Okay. We may be doing meal delivery and kids are eating in classrooms because we're still standing up that internet access piece. So those are some of those components, but I think they'll be here for the duration of the virtual piece this year.
Do you think, going back to Chris's question with regard to how do we know when we're going to do what we're going to do? I know that we get the dashboard screenshots. Mm-hmm. And so one of the questions that doesn't have to be answered right now, but as you're thinking about reopening, what are the components? Like, tell us, what are the things on the dashboard? Like, it says things like increasing, fluctuating, stable. So are we saying we want, all stable? Can we have one fluctuating, as long as they're not going up? I mean, the dashboard's really helpful, but only if we know how we're going to use it to make the next decision.
Okay.
Well, and how accurate it is. I mean, if, for instance, and this was part of our argument, I guess, last time, is that even we'll just use New Kent County, because there are.
That's what if you look at I mean, there's information there about just New Kent.
Yeah, but I'm saying, even if we have 5 positive cases in New Kent, we don't know what those 5 positive cases are. Are they in an age group that is 70 and older? Are they younger? Or because now that we're hearing everything, a lot of these statistics are being delayed that we're getting. So are they accurate? Are they 2 weeks old? Are they a week old? I mean, all of those, I think, now that we know the big picture, is that it's delayed reporting, and a lot of that, back to the 2 weeks thing, is this accurate information that we are getting, and the trends for what the dashboard is, are they up-to-date information? And I don't know the answer to that.
Well, but I mean, it'd be worthwhile to ask the health department.
Yeah.
And maybe just not check on it, maybe bump it up and just say, what's the
what's the state average?
What's the turnaround time? What they can give us if we want. I mean, I don't know if they send you the state average, state information, or just New Kent information.
I've been working now directly with the Virginia Department of Health, so I can ask that question.
Okay. So maybe part of it is when they developed it, what's the turnaround time on data being
Yeah.
when the numbers are crunched and they put it in the system.
Well, I think you've seen over the past couple of reports I've sent you, the reports are changing.
Yeah.
Like the metrics
Yes.
are changing.
Well, the
Even
visuals, the darn
colors have
visuals.
changed. So I think it's still
Yeah.
an evolving document, which is, I guess, both helpful but also frustrating.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's my concern, because I can look at other localities, and in a matter of a few weeks, their whole things have changed. My question is your reporting just that delayed? Because people made decisions based on what you did 2 weeks ago, and now it changed significantly in 2 weeks. So it makes it look a lot worse than it really is, or is it really accurate? And I guess that's for you guys, especially for adults and teachers, more than students. Pretty good picture that we have to look at. Yeah.
Our next steps in this work is really that next survey piece that would be for elementary families only, because they're who's in our immediate future. By the time we get to the middle school and or the high school, you could have a different decision. So we don't want to over survey you, and then your mind could change if you have a market period or semester and so forth. Continue with our facility preparations. Working through our procedures for any sort of closure and shift back to virtual, making sure that that's clearly outlined, that our administrators and our teachers feel comfortable with, those procedures. When do we close down a classroom versus when do we close down a school? And what does that mean? Those pieces. The daily schedule piece, which we talked quite a bit about, working with our transportation department, family communication throughout this piece, and then continuing the professional development for teachers. Because our professional development teachers has been entirely virtually driven. So looking at what do they need as we transition to an in-person model. So those are the big next steps. But we plan to bring you more information on the 5th, some of the answers to these questions, and ideally we've had some of those survey results as well. So that's the plan, is to continue to look at it, continue to get better at virtual, which we're doing every day, but also look for opportunities to safely bring kids back in person.
Anybody have questions? Want to move on? Okay. We are now going to talk about the new elementary school.
Absolutely, and this doesn't have any slides associated with it, but just wanted to bring you up to date on where we are with the new elementary school. Last we left our joint meeting, which was the last time we spoke about the new elementary school. The Board of Supervisors adopted a resolution to go into the fall bond pool. So that was on September 8th. Adopted a resolution to go in the fall bond pool. That was a big step forward for us. Remember when the pandemic hit in March, that was what we were getting ready to do. We passed a resolution to move forward, and then it was on the county, and the county held that because of the pandemic. So last month we passed our resolution, the county passed their resolution to go into the bond pool. What we're doing now is meeting with our partners at with the Board of Supervisors and talking through some of the details around the new elementary school, the price point, some of the work that we've been doing on to lower the price, and kind of where we see it moving. So started that last week. We'll continue that this week. The Board of Supervisors meets on October 30th. That is their work session. It's anticipated that hopefully a motion will be made to actually put a price to this school that will be going forward in the bond pool. So that's really the next step.
Mid-September 3rd.
I'm sorry, I wrote October 30th on mine, but it is September 30th. I apologize. September 30th work session. So that is the next step in the process. We continue to work with Mosley Architects around the new school and what some of the value management things that we can do, value engineering things that we can do. Also working in partnership with the county about are there some things that we could pay outside of this, furniture being something, or technology, or some of those components that we can use other sources, all in the effort of driving down that total price of the school. So that's just a quick overview of the new elementary school. If you have any questions about some of the work that we're doing in between, we'd be more than happy to answer. But since we had this touch point before their next meeting and we don't meet again until October 5th, I just wanted to bring you up to date and publicly talk about the next steps in the process. So we are,
We're making progress.
we're making progress and you know, we have some hope in this project and be nice to move forward on that project while we continue this in-person piece. So when we all come back together, you know, we have a good start on this new elementary school. It would be, we would look at a 22 opening, so fall of 22. I believe it was reported somewhere about a 21 opening. We've missed the window to do that. It just takes too long to build a new elementary school. But
Construction will potentially start the spring, I guess, of 2024.
correct, yes.
And we would start looking at redistricting again and doing all of that as well.
So-
We've already started that.
Yeah, redistricting, are we still moving
Well,
forward?
the great news on that, Chris, as a part of that committee is we're at the point of redistricting that we have two options to bring to the public. With the project being solved, we sort of just held that redistricting work. So all the groundwork has been done. The committee has met I think three times. Plus we've done one public information session. So we'd be ready to take that back on the road. And that could be October, it could be November. We definitely have time for that. All the work that we've done, even though it was started in the summer, still would be valid for a fall 22 opening because we are looking at future building and so forth. Once we get outside of 22, that data starts to fall apart a little bit because as the county's growing and building, but we feel good about where we are with that piece. That we could, we were initially slated for a public hearing in August, but we felt with no movement on the new elementary school at that point in time and the return to learn work we were doing, that it really wasn't a good time to move forward with that redistricting. But we're ready and we have options.
As we're looking at the redistricting, are we looking at it through the lenses of a potential middle school in 5 years or so? Or would we have to go back to the drawing board and do more redistricting if we had another elementary school?
We would have to, and it's a great question, and we've talked to, I keep wanting to say Moses, that's not Moses, Crawford GIS on the redistricting piece. Because that's so far in the future, any work that we would do right now would not hold in 5 years. But we would be able to see the 3 elementary schools and where those pieces go, and we would have some of the foundational work done.
I guess if we're paying, I mean, we're paying them to do this proper. And so my thought is, I mean, we have one middle school currently, so all 6 through, 8 are going to the one middle school. But if we ask them to buy, and we do have land purchased and set aside for the middle school, so we know where the middle school will go. So I think it would be smart to go ahead and do that.
There's another variable in that, and that's where the land development happens within the next 5 years. So if you've got neighborhoods that aren't on the radar right now, you might have concentrated populations.
Yes.
That are not developed yet. So you don't know where the growth is going to be potentially in the county until development happens.
Corporate developments will be built out in 5 years. It's already started and looking at number of young people coming from that piece. And talking to Crawford about that, because that was part of our initial conversation was a middle school piece as well. He feels strongly that the data is valid for about 2 years. And from that point, especially in a place like Pecan that is growing as rapidly as we are. But absolutely.
I have one question on the latest budget look at the elementary school. Does that include any space reconfiguration, or is that in that budget?
So the information that you have on where we are with the new elementary school does not include any space reconfiguration
So
in terms of
Reduction.
reduction. So let's take, for example, the auxiliary gym and doing something with that. That is not included in it. This is just,
So that's looks pretty good.
yes. So we've done some really heavy lifting in there. We've also looked at some of our CIP money that we would not utilize, including hopefully would not utilize additional trailers for the 2 elementary schools. We could utilize that money, toward that piece, and we'd be more than happy to do that. So really just being very creative with what we could do, without dramatically altering.
Right, and that also helps preserve the schedule a little better, because redesign would possibly push us out into another.
Quarter probably.
But we have gone down the road of what a redesign would do, could we do it, work with our attorneys on it, so forth. So we've gone down that track as well, in case we need to. That would take more and more conversation, and you guys get a couple with it before I would add that to a sheet.
I do think we're probably gonna have to look at it. I mean, it looks good, but it might not be low enough.
Right. And I have preliminary costs associated with doing something like that. And like I said, we've done the legwork on it, but that is not reflected currently.
And it is also does not count lowering, and I know you don't want to lower the contingency, but there's no contingency adjustment in that cost as well.
Correct. That keeps us at the 8.25.
Got it.
That contingency.
Okay.
I mean, we could lower the contingency after site works. Site work tends to be where a lot of the unknowns are.
Right.
Potentially, so once you go through that, your
Your fixed
risk
cost
is
is pretty
a lot
much
lower.
would be the same.
So that is really trying to preserve a project that we feel would work and would be reasonable and wouldn't require us to come back for additional money at some point. So that contingency is one of those.
Okay. Got it. Any other questions? No? We have 2 action items this evening. The first one is personnel. Do I hear a motion to approve personnel matters as presented?
I move we approve personnel matters as presented.
Okay, do I hear a second? Okay, all in favor? No one is opposed, motion carries. The next item, do I hear a motion to approve the textbook transfer request for FY20 and FY21 as presented?
So moved.
Yeah, you can. So moved. Do I hear a second?
A second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
No, anyone opposed? Motion carries. Any comments at all about next meetings? Are we good to go? We know what we're doing?
Our next meeting is October 5th, and it will be a regular board meeting. Like I said, we have the board supervisor work session on the 30th, because we plan on attending and answering any questions.
There.
30th, I'll check the time, it's typically in the morning. The work session is typically at 9, but
Anybody
I'll confirm that. Send it to you.
We should, yeah, as many of us as can come, please come. Okay? The meeting is adjourned.